Welcome to the Vietnamese Poetry, Literature channel. Today we will listen to the work, Young Friend, by author Thach Lam. Let's listen. Mr. Bin. I was busy looking at a store, quickly turned around, bewildered to see who was calling. On the other side of the sidewalk, a small person, dressed in my clothes, smiled and waved. I don't know who it is yet. That person waited for the handcarts to leave, then quickly ran across the street to me, his hands raised happily. Ah, Mr. Bao. We were delighted. Bao grabbed my hand tightly, shaking it back and forth. Haven't you forgotten me? I replied. How to forget an old classmate? Especially you, I miss you even more. A ray of joy flashed through Bao's eyes. He said leisurely. It's been a long time, hasn't it? It's been more than 7 or 8 years so quickly. Do I look different from before? I looked at Bao from beginning to end, then replied. Not much different, just a little thinner. But his, girly, look is still the same, not different at all. We both laughed. When he was still studying at school, Mr. Bao still had the girl badge given to him by his brothers. Because at that time, he was only 13 years old when we were in the first grade. His cheeks were rosy and his face was as pretty as a real girl. And his personality is also naive. At first we called him jokingly, but after that name became familiar, everyone in our classmates called Mr. Bao that way. We often tease him by calling him closer, patting his head with his beautiful hair, jokingly kissing him on the cheek and saying, "My baby girl is beautiful," or something similar. Mr. Bao tried his best to stretch out his hands, his face turned red, he looked even cuter and more like a girl. The reminder of those common memories makes us become as intimate as before. I held Bao's arm as we walked and talked. I heard it sounds like you're studying in the general city of Nam Dinh. Why are you up here now? Bao sadly replied. I've been fired, sir. Since the beginning of last year. He told me the reason. He was in his 4th year, about to take the exam, when it happened that his students were mourning a wise man. The whole class was expelled. After a while, everyone continued to apply and be allowed to return to study. It was just him and a few others, but I didn't know who was falsely accused of being the leader of the school dropout and was expelled. You can't clear your name. Even his father from Thailand also came over and talked to the governor, but to no avail. From that point on, my teacher was very angry with me. My family is poor, you know, and I am the only hope of the whole family. My siblings are still young. My teacher and my mother suffered so much to raise me so much. But suddenly he was kicked out. Pausing for a moment, Mr. Bao continued. I couldn't bear to go home. My teacher kept getting drunk, then scolded me for being an unfilial child who betrayed my parents, didn't care about home, and only competed with my brothers to the point of being kicked out. My teacher forced me to go to Hanoi to find a job, saying that if I couldn't find a job, I wouldn't come back to see him again. Mr. Bao sighed softly. If I didn't have a job, I really wouldn't dare go home. My teacher is very strict. Why don't you apply for a job? Impossible. I was banned for life from working in state departments. Mr. Bao became quiet. After a moment, I asked. What about the traders? Private departments? Well, I only have hope in those places. But it's very difficult, few people dare to borrow from a student who has been expelled and banned. Wherever they go, they know. Besides, I don't have any certificates because I've never worked. We stopped talking and walked silently on the sidewalk. When we got to Kua Nam Market, Bao pulled me away and said, Train 80 is here, I have to go home or they will wait. Where are you? Bao put a sad smile on his mouth and replied. I stayed at a small restaurant under Khao Zay. I don't dare invite him down to play. Then you come and play with me. Do you remember the house number? Bao quickly jumped on the tram and raised his hand to say hello. I added, Anyway, I'll come and play. The car disappeared into the corner of Hangday Street. I slowly walked back home, thinking endlessly. This meeting brought back many memories of my student life in Thai province. The forgotten faces of old friends reappear in memory, with fun lessons and carefree frolics. How many happy days of youth! Thinking about Bao, I felt pity. That little boy was as pretty as a girl, with an innocent look that made his friends love him back then. I often followed him to his house, a thatched house at the beginning of the province. The two sat on a bamboo mat talking next to him. Mr. Bao's mother made egg cakes and steamed sticky rice to sell. I only met his teacher occasionally. He seemed very serious, and seemed to always be leisurely doing nothing. I don't remember. A few months later, Mr. Bao came to visit me. He looked different, a little thinner, and pale as if sick. He seemed to have walked a lot on the street, so his clothes and shoes were full of dust. I invited him to sit down and asked kindly, "Have you found a job yet?" Bao shook his head. "No, sir. For the past few months, I've been everywhere in Hanoi but haven't been able to find any work. Wherever you go, people refuse." He thought for a moment, then added, "People are so unfair and unreasonable. What sin have I committed?" The words choked in his throat. He sat stiffly, not bothering to drink the cup of water I offered him. I was also silent, not knowing what to say. Those words of comfort at that time seemed useless to me. Just wait a little longer and see. Let people forget that story. I have to wait, but I don't know what to do. But you also have to have money to pay for accommodation. Mr. Bao tried to smile. The smile was pitiful and embarrassing. I looked closely at him. The salary shirt he was wearing was old and faded, with a few discreet patches. On his face there were many dense red spots on both cheeks. Unintentionally, I asked, "You've been bitten by mosquitoes all over your face." Mr. Bao looked embarrassed. "My place doesn't have a curtain and it's not airy. Sometimes mosquitoes bite all night and you can't sleep." Seeing my family members preparing to serve dinner, he stood up and said goodbye. I walked him out the door. The road to Khao Zay is straight and dusty. He shook my hand and was about to turn around and leave when I asked, "Didn't you wait for the tram to go home?" Bao shook his head and patted his pocket. "I haven't run out of money yet." I hesitated and held him back. "Please wait for me a moment." Then she went into the house and took out the remaining dimes in her pocket, awkwardly giving it to him. "I'll take it for now and go for a ride." Bao didn't look at the money, put it in his pocket, then held my hand tightly and said softly, "Thank you." He turned away. I watched until he blended into the crowd of people coming home from work. A week later, I was passing through the Southgate Market when I suddenly heard a voice calling. A motorbike stopped near the sidewalk. I noticed Mr. Bao, lying right in the car, next to an elderly woman. He tried to raise his head and told me, "I'm returning to Thailand, Mr. Bin." The voice sounded like someone out of breath. His face was red and his eyes lit up unusually. I asked in fear, "Damn, what's wrong with you?" "I'm sick, brother." The landlady was afraid that I would die at her house, so she asked her to take me home. "Hello there." I was stunned and silent. The woman looked at me and said, as if intending to explain, "He has had a fever for 7 or 8 days now." Mrs. Hai also gave him a few bowls of medicine, but his illness didn't improve, so she asked me to take him home. He also knows that when people do business at home, they need to be careful. But how can I go home when I'm sick like this? Mr. Bao looked at me without answering, looking very tired. The train horn suddenly sounded at the station. The woman urged the cartman, "Come on, hurry up or you'll miss it." I held Mr. Bao's hand. His hand was hot like fire. I felt my heart tighten as his car turned away. More than a year has passed. Since that day, I have not received any news about Mr. Bao anymore. His image faded from my mind. Then one afternoon, I was sitting under the light reading the newspaper when the door suddenly opened. Two boys wearing dark clothes peeked out and then timidly walked in. I am surprised. He placed his white hat on his chest and asked politely, "Sir, is this Mr. Bin's house?" "Yes, I am." "What do you two ask?" The boy silently reached inside and took out a small paper-wrapped package on the table in front of me, then said, "Sir, we are Mr. Bao's brothers." "Ah, so where is Mr. Bao?" The boy will answer, "Our brother committed suicide." I was shocked and looked at the two boys. I noticed that the two white hats were both wrapped in funeral ribbons. So really, Mr. Bao committed suicide? What kind of depression and suffering caused him to die at a young age of less than 20 years old? When I asked about it, I learned that Mr. Bao from here was constantly sick. Then he stayed home and didn't go anywhere else. One afternoon early last month, his mother came home from the market and found him hanging from the beam. Family members quickly carried him to the hospital for treatment. He regained consciousness for a moment, then at 11 o'clock at night he passed away. After the boy finished speaking, he continued, "Before he died, my brother called the two of us and said, 'I only have one good friend, Mr. Bin. Remember to bring this package to him.'" I opened it and saw two old photos. A photo taken of the whole class, back when I was studying in Thailand. I noticed I was standing next to Bao. The other photo is a photo of half his body. Seeing the handsome and innocent appearance of my old friend, my heart felt sad. Tears welled up in my eyes, I felt choked up as if I wanted to cry. The two boys were also quiet, sad, looking at me. The two of them look so much like Mr. Bao, with the same smart eyes and such a cute and innocent look. I suddenly thought of the poverty of his family, of those two children who had no support to study, how pitiful it was. I folded up two old photos and sweetly asked them to sit down on the chairs. I cried softly. "Do you two love him?" The two of you were quiet. The youngest boy suddenly covered his face and cried, his shoulders heaving under his old dark cloth shirt. At the end of the work, please support me with the like button and subscribe to the channel to listen to more works.